In terms of the progress of this task force, which is so imperative, what have you learned today that you didn't know 17 days ago?
The lack of clear testimony as to what happened, and the idea that somebody should have been responsible for this, but we don't know exactly who should have been or why they weren't. And so then it begs the question, so wait a minute, this isn't your first rodeo. This is what you do for a living. This is what you all do. This is what you pride yourself in. So if we're trying to figure out today what happened on July 13th at 6:11 in the evening, this is not the time to try to figure out what should have been done. This is the time to figure out why wasn't it done, because we already have protocols set up for every one of these things. This is not a guessing game. This is being prepared for whatever the instance may be that we're being prepared for.
You mentioned in the New York Times that you had specific concerns when you learned about this site before the Trump rally. What were those specific concerns that you expressed to the Trump campaign?
The casualness with the way they were answering my questions. So when I got this phone call, it said, we just want to let you know President Trump is going to be in Butler, Pennsylvania, and this was on July 5th. I said, that's great. That's my hometown. That's where I grew up. Coming in July 13th, he'll be there. I said, okay, that's fine. What venue are we going to be at? And they said, we're going to be at the Butler Farm Show. I said, no. You must mean the big Butler Fair. And they said, no, the Butler Farm Show. I said, well, wait a minute, then who visited the site? Who's done the overall look at it? Who's looked at the site? And the answer was, Congressman, we've already made a decision. And I said, well, let me tell you, from living there my whole life, you've made the wrong decision. There are places to have this. That is not the place. It's on a 2-lane highway. Half of that highway right now is 1 lane because they're putting North Sewers in. The entry and exit are going to be difficult. The amount of traffic coming in and going out is going to be difficult. And I have very, very pertinent security and safety questions. And so, and then it came down to, I said, so by telling me you've already made the decision, the answer is you've never been to the site. And I'm telling you, there are better places to do this. I would go to the Big Butler Fair, 4-lane highway in, interstate within 1 mile. This is going to be overwhelming, and this crowd will just swamp that entire venue. And they said, no, Congressman, that's not true. I said, listen, the last time President Trump was here, we had over 50,000 people. That was at the Butler Airport. So the answer back was, Congressman, really, 6,000 or 7,000 people. Okay, this is a candidate for the presidency, not the President of the United States. I said, stop it. I'm telling you, you're too casual about this. This is not proper what you're doing, and you need to recalibrate. Come out and visit. They said, we've already made a decision, and we'll let you know anything further. And that was it. And it was a disconnect, and I thought, this is the most disrespectful thing. And people who would, you think they'd at least say, well, oh, we didn't realize it was your hometown, so you know that whole area, and you've been there. And I could have said many times, I played American Legion baseball there back in the day. From the very onset of this, I was concerned about who picked the site, who did the site visit, who then determined from a security standpoint, where are the parameters, what are we concerned about, where would be the vantage points, and how would we have the security that we need to have. And it was just, so much people kind of dismiss you and say we've already made a decision. So I really wasn't involved in it then until the Thursday before I visited the site. It was open, wide open, and the setup was just starting. I thought, there's no people here. We're maybe a little bit over 24 hours away from having this event.
What was your specific safety concern? I know you mentioned the traffic, but anything else about the buildings and the coverage?
It was just an open field. It was an open field. There really was, the only high point was the water tower. The AGR building is off to the left side of where they were setting up. It just seemed to me that there just wasn't enough coverage from a visual standpoint. I'm not an expert in this stuff, but I'm assuming people who pride themselves, the Secret Service and the FBI, this is what they've done. They're professionals at this, right?
So you didn't know the plan, but
no, I didn't know the plan, but I knew the site wasn't the proper site.
But you thought, wow, there are some alarming things at this site.
Everything bothered me about it: the entry, the exit, the ability to get people in and out. How we were going to address any of these concerns with an overcrowded area. How would you actually police that? How could it be secure? And if there was something that went wrong, how would we get out? How would we get people out?
So 2 weeks ago, the Secret Service acting director, he testified before Congress and made at least 3 serious allegations that disparage the competence and reputations of local law enforcement. Were you surprised he was so forceful in his denunciation when he talked about those snipers inside and their line of sight of Thomas Crooks?
Well, I was disappointed, first of all, that somebody in that position would go ahead and make this supposition and say, well, here's the problem. The local guys didn't do their job. And then it comes back to me is I know a lot of those local guys. I know what they take pride in, and I know that they took personal time that day to be there to help. Now, the fact that there was no game plan, there was no touch gloves, there was no plan really put into place is, oh, I'm glad you're all here. You can go here, you go here, you go over there. When you talk to the local police, and I hold these guys in the highest esteem because of what they do. And then I go back to the Secret Service, the FBI. These are the people that we're supposed to look to. These are the professionals. These are the best of the best. These are the all pros, so to speak, of this kind of law enforcement and safety. And the fact that they were so casual about it, saying, well, no, these other guys should have done it. Say, really? Really? You really believe that? And when I know the guys that were there, and I know their dedication to their community, and for that day, that was an opportunity for them to show how much they could be helpful when they needed to be helpful. And the fact that there was very little guidance on it and very little preparation for it led me to believe there's something that's wrong here today. And when you hear about it afterwards, look, if you're the guy in charge and something goes wrong, you're the guy in charge and something went wrong.
So were you
surprised? You don't look for somebody to point a finger at. They didn't do their job.
So were you surprised how hard he was?
Absolutely, absolutely, because he's making accusations, and he wasn't the head of the Secret Service whenever this was all laid out. So I'm a little bit surprised that somebody who wasn't in charge of it all, but then took the position after the resignation, is speaking so clearly about who didn't do their job that day. So that's interesting. You weren't involved in it at all. How are you making that? You didn't see the game films.
And then in his news conference, Rowe, a week later, he did emphasize that the responsibility for failure fell to the Secret Service and that the locals were not to blame, but he did not correct or retract any of the allegation he has made about that line of sight, about where they were positioned. And do you think that that was a mistake, that he didn't actually say or correct or retract anything about those local snipers? Do you think that was a mistake?
I think that most of us, when we're dealing with people who are professionals, at the end of the day, the professionals are always the ones that are responsible for the whole structure, the whole game plan, the films after the game to see where we went wrong. And you don't say it was somebody else's fault. You say, we failed that day. It was our fault. We weren't prepared.
He didn't retract.
Apparently he didn't think it was his place to do that. But again, had come in afterwards. So I think that may have been new to him too. But I do know most of the people I know that are in positions of authority, it's really, when there's a failure, they take complete charge of it. It was our fault. Should have done it. That's who we are. That's what we always want to be. They weren't that day.
The Secret Service talked about, we assumed there was coverage on the AGR complex. Butler Township telling me that they told the Secret Service when they asked for coverage that they didn't have the manpower to cover that building. So why would he be assuming? Why would there be assumptions when, for example, Butler Township said, we don't have the manpower, we're doing traffic?
The basics of anything, when you're in a position of authority, you never assume anything. You always are proof positive that you're ready for whatever the event is, whatever your responsibilities are, and that whomever you've placed in a position, they are actually there. You can't assume that happens. That's why I find this really hard to believe. Well, the frequencies, we couldn't communicate because the frequencies weren't communicated. We couldn't use our cell phones because the cell phones weren't ready. So are you telling me you waited to an emergency to find out that you couldn't communicate? That makes absolutely no sense to me at all.
So these assumptions, do you think the locals were lying, or who do you think is not telling the most accurate picture?
I think the local law enforcement assumed that they were working with professionals that would actually be able to direct them where they should be, when they should be there, and communicate with them constantly. The assumption really would have been on our local law enforcement people relying on professionals who had asked them to be there that day to participate.
Why do you think Acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe showed the picture with the camera outside of that window where the snipers, the local snipers, had been positioned. Why do you think he showed that picture?
I have no idea why he did that. And again, I wasn't there for his questioning period. But again, I go, so Inspector Rowe was an add-on after the fact. So I don't know what was his experience before then. Had he ever really had these experiences before where he had to be the spokesperson?
He talked about, though, their line of sight.
Yes.
And why perhaps they could have seen Thomas Crooks. Do you think that was fair?
Well, I think it's fair to look at what happened. We have all kind of footage right now. Apparently, the Secret Service were the only people that did not see Crooks on that roof, because people at the fair that day kept pointing and screaming that he's on the roof, he's on the roof. We saw before he even entered the building, Crooks entered the building, the people across the street saying, a person with a sight finder, he's already walked across the lawn, he went into that building, and he was told there's nobody that's gone in there. So when you look at it, and I think the assumption is right now, how do we assume that it should have been somebody else's duty to actually perform this on that day? And I think that's the worst time to make an assumption. You should say, I know what happened, this is where we failed, and that's why this whole task force will not stop until we get to the answers.
And just one last thing on this. But
Sure.
Senator Grassley said these are the pictures. This is where they say they were, behind the windows. And he said this is actually where the snipers were, but it was very unfair, some of the locals feel, that you said that we would have had a line of sight, and by you showing the roof picture, that was unfair.
We'll see.
Okay.
We'll see. There's more of this to come out, and we'll do the deep dive on it. I want to get away from who made there was a lot of mistakes made that day, but it was made by the people who were running the program. Local law enforcement came to help. There was a structure in place that you would think from many other events. The Secret Service, the FBI would be real familiar with that. It's everyday work for them. Law enforcement came in to help out that day, not to take the place of the federal agents that were there.
Do you know who approved this site plan?
You know, I can tell you this. The only person I talked to ahead of time was the Trump advance team. And so the only question I had with them, I said, listen, this is the wrong place. And so my conversation wasn't with any federal outfit, it was with the Trump advance team. They made the choice. And I don't know from that point on what else was the preparation that went into this. I get you picked out a site, probably on a laptop. You saw something you thought made sense to them. But it doesn't seem to me that the follow-up was there that should have been there.
So, as I mentioned to you, there was, once Crooks was spotted below that AGR building with a rangefinder, it was about 5:45, and then my sources say at 6:02 that it was communicated into the Secret Service command post that Crooks had been running through buildings. At 6:03, the Washington Post reported there was a call Ed Lenz made to the PSP person in that command post. There was a 40-second conversation. Do you have any idea what was communicated at that point?
I do not, but I do know this. That was plenty of advance warning. They never should let the president come out in that stage.
Mm-hmm.
If they were suspicious of somebody being there that shouldn't be there, just keep him back.
Mm-hmm.
Corey would be alive today. The other two men that were wounded would not be wounded. The president would not have been wounded. The shooter himself would still be alive. They would have taken custody of him, but I don't believe anything else would have happened.
Why
Who knows? Who knows?
do you think they did not take former President Trump off of the stage at that point?
I have absolutely no idea. To me, that was the most fundamental thing of all. I remember myself even walking out after it was over, because my wife, 3 of my grandchildren, and my son were there. I said, if they had the fact that there was something suspicious going on, who in the world didn't have the common sense to just say, the only target there would be the president, the former president of the United States. This young man wasn't showing up for the heck of it. He was there for a specific reason, at a specific time, on a specific day, with a specific target. Why put the target out there if you think there's somebody there that could be a problem?
I know you said you're digging through a lot, but has your office been able to figure out what was on that 40-second phone call, Ed Lenz, into the command post when things were getting...
We do have the hour, the minute, the second of all the communication that took place. So when I hear we didn't have the ability to communicate with somebody, I can show them 3 pages down to minute,
But that phone
second.
call that Ed had with the state police...
That I'd have to go back and take a look at, but I've sat with Mr. Lenz. Mr. Lenz, right off the bat, he was so disturbed by what happened and so shaken by it, because he felt there should have been something happened before this. This never should have happened. He was deeply, deeply wounded by the fact that this was a failure and it never should have happened.
And then lastly, when all this was happening, after the 602, it was communicated Crooks was running through the buildings, we don't know, okay. Were you surprised to see there was a gentleman from Butler, David Stewart, who captured video on the ground that showed cops were obviously looking during that time at 604, running around, guns drawn, looking for this? Were you surprised to see that local and state officers running with guns drawn 3 to 4 minutes before the shots were fired with no reaction from the Secret Service to remove former President Trump from the stage?
Well, the game films show that somebody should have been aware of what was going on, and the people in charge that day were not the local law enforcement people. It was the Secret Service and the FBI. And it's hard for me to sit here and believe that somehow they didn't have control of that situation when we had people very much aware of it. And again, I go back to the same thing. There's too much going on at this time and too much confusion. There's no reason to let the former president come out and start into a speech. It just doesn't make any sense.
And then when you saw they're running around and you hear President Trump in the background speaking, you must have been shocked to see that.
Well, so for me, I'm watching him, and I'm probably 55, 60 feet away from him. When I hear this first shot go off, and I'm thinking, what is that? And then the series of shots, and I watch him grab his head, I actually thought that he had been assassinated because he dropped down. The Secret Service, I'm assuming it was the Secret Service, covered him, but then right over my left shoulder was some cries about somebody else being wounded, and as I turned around to look, I could see that somebody had been wounded because there was blood showing. Two things. First of all, more than anything else, I think I was just mad. I was just mad. I can't believe that this can happen in Butler, Pennsylvania, in the Butler Farm Showgrounds. This is the safest place in the world. And then to watch this happen, it's like, we have professional people here. I think when people look at things, you look at the FBI, you look at Secret Service, you look at all these different things, that this is who they are. They are the best of the best at this test. Why was their failure at the top level? You could say something happened down below where people aren't familiar with that or aren't accustomed to doing that kind of coverage. When we had lawmen there who were very, very effective and efficient, but we didn't have the structure that needed to be put into place, but we did have the best of the best from the Secret Service and the FBI, at least the way the American people think about it. Where was the intervention and why didn't it take place? And so now I look at that, and so the faith and trust and confidence the American people have to have has been shaken so badly, and that's what allows all of these different theories to come forward. And we have to get answers from the American people. This cannot go unchallenged and unanswered.
2 more questions.
Yes.
Please. Do you have any information about who decided to keep the AGR building outside of the perimeter at this point?
No.
Okay. Do you know who decided to not post someone on the roof? Because as far as you know, you had told me earlier, was anyone posted on that roof?
I didn't realize that there had been personnel up there. I actually went into the AGR building to see what happened. I went in with Homeland Security about a week after everything had taken place. The window that was broken where they supposedly, we had people, was broken and it hadn't been fixed yet where they could shut it, and the thing kept going. It was so hot that day that they had to come away from the roof. It was just too hot. I guess it was too hot, but I don't know because I wasn't there in that day and that time.
But
so
are people telling you that someone was supposed to be posted on the roof?
Well, my understanding was there were people that were there within eyesight of the roof. You'd almost have to go to that position and you can look right out that window and you can say, I can see exactly where that young man was. The other problem is, and as you know, I went in Sunday morning after Mass to the site. I was denied entrance because it was a crime scene.
Right.
But the crime scene was completely cleaned. We were looking for where's the spent shells. We're wondering on different things, including where's the body, and finding out that the jurisdiction had been gone from the Butler coroner's office to the Allegheny County coroner's office, and I was still waiting to see an autopsy, and really we were very concerned about actually seeing the body to look and try to match it up with what the autopsy said, and we were told, well, the FBI made a decision to turn Mr. Cook's body back to his family and permission to go ahead and cremate. And at that point, it's like all of our evidence is gone that we should look at.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any idea if President Trump when he's coming back in October? I have to ask you, any idea when President Trump's coming back in October?
Well, the only thing I know is when I talked to him afterwards, I saw him in Harrisburg, and we talked a little bit about it. I didn't see him at the convention, but I saw him in Harrisburg. And he said, coming back to Butler. And I said, you are the toughest guy I know. He said, and we're doing it outside. And I said, you know what, Mr. President, that's your decision. I'll be there. But I just want to make sure we never see this happen again. Not just you or anybody should not have to go through that. And the casualness with the way this was addressed, to me, is just absolutely unacceptable.
You'll get to the bottom of it. Thank you so much.